Hey, it's Jay coming to you from my shop. I'm getting ready to do part 2 of my hardware store build. In part 1, I built some base cabinets to hold bins like this. These are larger bins to hold things. I've got my safety equipment in this one, my soldering iron in this one. It holds 20 of those bins to keep a lot of stuff that's larger. But I've been storing my smaller hardware, screws, nails, things like that, in these Plano bins for 20 years. These Plano stowaway bins, they're really nice bins. This one is full of nails, and then I have another thicker one that's full of some plumbing supplies and things like that, plumbing fittings, things like that. But recently I've moved to these kind of storage bins that have removable, they're a case with removable bins in them. And this one's full of my drywall anchors. But I've built up about 20 of these things, and I had way too many of the Planos to fit in the last shelf I had. The last shelf I had was hanging back here for a while. It was constructed where it was a 3/4 inch plywood frame, and I had cut grooves to put shelves in it. And I cut the grooves using an 1/8 inch kerf saw blade on my table saw. And then I used 1/4 inch nominal shelves on that. And so what I did for every shelf was I just cut a rabbet in the side of the shelf to make it fit in the 1/8 inch kerf, and I slid them in, and there was no problems there. Some of these bins were pretty heavy, and the shelves did sag a little, but there was never any issues where the shelves were trying to break or separate or anything like that. It worked out fine. For this one, I'm going to actually put 1/4 inch grooves in there so the plywood slides in. I did do some measurement and testing to make sure that the shelf wouldn't just fall back out every time I grabbed a bin and pulled it out. The shelf wouldn't come out with it. And you'll see that in the video where I double check my measurements. First thing I'm going to do is go over on my whiteboard the dimensions of these cabinets just to make some sense of it all, and then I'm going to get to building it. This is a pretty much a just build video where I build these cabinets, and I'm going to go over why I'm doing what I'm doing while I'm doing it. I'm going to do a whole nother video just on these bins, and I've bought like 4 different brands of these things. I've done some 3D printing of them. And I tried to shoot a section for this video on it, and it would have made this video like an hour long, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in a separate video. Once again, I used my sketchbook and drew up a design. I measured the bins, the nominal dimensions of 4 different brands of those, I'm going to call them Sorta Sortimo bins. The Sortimo Adam Savage kind of thing is what I'm going for here, is a budget Sortimo. And then I drew up a cabinet design to hold those bins. So I'm going to go ahead and draw on the whiteboard here what I've come up with. So the nominal dimensions for the bins in general, and they're all within about a 1/4 inch of each other. There seems to have settled in on a standard. But the nominal dimensions are 16 5/8 wide, about 13 1/4 deep, and then the shorter bins are 2 1/2 inches and the taller bins are 4 1/2 inches. For the cabinet itself, I decided that it should be 36 inches tall, 3 feet, and that decision was based on just what I can reach. I wanted it to be a certain distance above the base cabinet and how high I can reach. I can reach up to 8 feet, so with 3 feet and a 50-something inch base cabinet with some space in between, I kind of came up with, okay, 8 foot reach is where it's going to be. The cabinet itself being 3 feet tall, the inner dimensions, so that I can fit the bins, are 17 inches wide, which gives me plenty of space for 16 5/8 plus a little, and then 13 1/2 inch deep to give me the 13 1/4 inch depth. And that makes the total outside dimensions 18 1/2 by 14 1/4. I'm going to cut a bunch of grooves that run on the inside that way, that I can put the shelves in. To the back of the cabinet, I think so. For this whole build of these cabinets, there's only 3 different parts I have to make. A top, a back, and a side. The top and bottom are the same, the sides are the same, and then the back is a separate piece. So I need 4 sides, 2 backs, and 4 tops or bottoms to make 2 cabinets. So I'm going to use 1 piece of plywood, a 4x8 sheet, and in the 8-foot direction I'm going to make a 17-inch cut and 2 14¼ cuts. The 17-inch cut, when I cut it at 3 feet, is going to make 2 backs. And then I can use this piece as a top or bottom. And then I'm going to make 4 sides out of the 14¼ cuts. And then these pieces will become a top or a bottom and a top or a bottom. That leaves me, if you're keeping count, 1 more top or bottom piece that I need. The leftover scrap is too thin for that, so I do have a scrap left over from the base cabinet build that'll work perfectly and I think is already edge banded. Time to cut some plywood. If you watch my Izzy Swan jig video, these infeed supports, this is the first time I've actually used them for anything, and this is the first cut I actually made, and I had some issues with it trying to get the thing loaded, and when I tried to make the first cut, there was a staple in the side of the plywood left over from the hardware store. So once I removed that, I was able to make the first cut. Make the other 2 cuts, and then I set up my MFT to do the cross cuts for the long pieces, the long 3-foot pieces. Trying this 3D printed, this is the old dust deflector that you put on here. It's supposed to make it work better. But I just bought the little 3D printed thing. Makes it a little nicer to look at and use. Okay. Well, that 3D printed thing doesn't seem to work as well as crystal dust deflector. You'll notice I'm double checking square of my table by using my 18-inch woodpecker square. This is a very expensive piece, and it's going to show up again in this video. In fact, later on it's going to become one of the stars of this whole show. Okay, so now I'm going to do the double flip. Board, so I have the straight edge. Now I'm going to just double check my 3-foot measurement. And it's good. It's spot on. Perfect. Okay. That's what usually happens. Everything is usually perfect on this cutting table because it's one of the best cutting tables on the planet, according to all the woodworkers I've surveyed. These 2 pieces are the sides. This piece is going to be a top or bottom piece. Now I'm processing through the 3 large pieces I cut out of my plywood. These 8-foot long pieces I'm cutting into sides, the back and the backs, and then the extra cut off pieces are going to be the tops and bottoms. Back there, and this should be the other top or bottom, I think. Now that I'm done cutting all the plywood, I'm going to go ahead and cut the edge banding for it. I have more of the not so good cherry around, and I'm pretty much going to have just enough to get this project done. Now it's time to glue on some of that edge banding. For the top and the bottom pieces, I just need a small piece across the short distance, and I am going to just use a nailer and nail that on. When it comes to the side pieces, I'm going to cut the shelf mount grooves through the sides of this thing, and I don't want to have nails in the way, so I'm going to use blue tape as my clamp. There we go. Get this centered up right here, push down, tape, and tape. So into day one, I've got all my parts cut, approximate size and edge banded. Tops and bottoms here with edge banding, sides with edge banding, and the backs. About 2.5 hours for the day. I have things to do tonight, so I'm gonna wait till tomorrow. So now it's the next day. First thing I do is start trimming down the edge banding. I use the same jig I used on the lower cabinets for the hardware store base. It's just a homemade router jig, and then I go ahead and sand down each piece. Once I'm done doing all the edge banding, I take it over to the table saw, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take each piece and run it through the table saw with the edge banding side against the blade. And I'm barely going to shave it, but I just want to make sure that the edge banding is parallel to the other side, so that when I assemble it, it all goes together perfectly well. I'll even do the sides that have the nails in them, and I'm shaving so little off that I don't even get to the complete inset of the wood of the nailer. So the nail heads don't get touched. I'm just barely shaving it off. You can see I adjust the table saw exactly. So it might seem counterintuitive, but the first thing I'm going to cut, the first dimension I'm going to get all my pieces to, is the depth of the top and bottom. So on this cabinet, the back of the cabinet is going to be the full height, and then the top and bottom are going to butt up against it like that. And then the sides are going to be the combination of the two added together. So the first dimension I need to do is the top piece dimension, and then I can add the it's the thickness width of the back panel onto it, make the sides that size, and then I'll do the back, the width of the back. If you remember, you might not remember, but when I first cut that, that was the first cut I made on the table saw, so there's still a raw edge on that. So I'm going to cut those to width, and then I'll cut the top and bottom to width to match that as well. So I'm going to do everything so that I set the table saw once, make all the cuts, and everything's going to match together, hopefully ideally. So first thing I'm going to do is cut all the tops and bottoms to depth. Alright, so now I'm going to set the table saw, and you can see it'll just make contact with the blade tooth there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoot it over, grab one of these scraps to be the thickness of the back piece. Put it in there. Set that there. Move it up until it makes the same level of contact with the blade. Blade tooth. Might just be a little touch too much. Let me just give it a tappy tappy. Tappy tappy. It's pretty decent there. Let me just one more try. After about 5 more tries, I got it right. And go ahead and make the cut. width right there. Now, I cut all 4 sides to that width, and I should have perfect fitting together cabinet. Actually gonna make. So if you're keeping up, so far I have the tops and bottoms all only cut to depth. I'm going to cut one side square here at the cutting table, and then I'm going to use the table saw, and I'm going to set it up exactly like I did the other cuts. I'm just going to use the width of the back to set the width, and then I'm going to run each of these pieces through the table saw and get them perfectly square and set to exact size. So I measured the ply that I'm going to use as my shelf pieces. That's about 0.2 to 0.21 inches. So it's close to a 1/4 inch, but not quite. So if I cut 1/4 inch grooves exactly, it should be spot on what I need. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set up the dado blade in a way, in the thinnest configuration I can. See what kind of groove it makes. Around 1/4. It's just, yep, it's a 1/4 inch exactly. So that should be good. I'm gonna live with that. Now I need to get the table saw set up. The first cut needs to be 3 inches plus the width of a piece of plywood from the fence, so that the first slot is 3 inches from the edge, and then I need to get the depth of the cut set to somewhat about halfway through the piece of plywood. Okay, I've laid these things all out so that I have outside, inside, inside, outside, outside, inside, inside, outside. So all these are going to be the, I'm going to call them bottoms for now, so I'm going to put B's on them. Those are going to be the bottoms. And then I'm going to put an arrow to the side that gets the grooves in it. So that should always be down, and the B should always be up against the fence. The Izzy Swan infeed cross-cut jig support jig thing that I built in the last video comes in real handy on this one because I need it to get the piece, each piece set up. And as I push the thing forward, I can start to make the cut. It's nice to be able to set the cross-cut jig in the back, and I make my first cut. If my math is right, I only need to do this about 43 more times, maybe? Something like that. When I start off, I can't get the Izzy Swan jig close enough because the router table fence flange is in the way. Once I move the fence out far enough, I can get the groove lined up. Then I change sides because the pieces are starting to try to rotate off the fence. And then I go and sand down all the sides, take it over to the router table, put a chamfer, and then I do a bunch of hand sanding to make everything smooth and nice to the touch. Spent about the last 20 minutes or so marking where all my dominoes are going to go, and now I'm just batching out the cuts. The first thing I'm doing is all the flat cuts that are this way, and then I'll do all the ones that are standing on edge. The domino makes quick work of the joinery, as it should. show you all the sanding. I'm sure you appreciate that. But here's how the whole thing goes together. I make a C-shaped thing out of the top, bottom, and the back. And then I put the dominoes in, and given that I made all the cuts to the right size, it fits right together. And one of the nice things is it self-squares, and it all goes together really nicely. Both these cabinets went together perfectly because I spent the time setting up the table saw and all the other stuff to get them perfectly lined up, square, straight, and all I had to do was clamp them together. Once I measure it for square, it's square. Then just a little glue cleanup, and this thing should be ready for finish. So I've got about 9 more hours today in. It was a pretty long day today. I've got both cabinets glued up. Pretty much ready to finish. I probably need to run a quick sander over them and get a little glue scraping done, but I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 minutes each cabinet, and then I'm ready for finish. So about 11 and a half hours so far into these things. Alright, last night I spent about a half an hour putting on some finish on these. Just a little thin polyurethane, real quick slathered it on there. They look fine. All good. Next thing, I got 2 more things I need to do. Pretty quick. I need to make shelves to go in here, and I need to put them on the wall out there. And I think I'm going to use some French cleats for that. It's the only thing I like French cleats for is hanging cabinets and things like that. I've got this junky old piece of shear ply. This side doesn't look so bad, but I'm going to go ahead and use this to make a test piece, and then I can test fit it in both cabinets, see if I can get a size that fits all the slots, and if I do, I'll have the table saw set up already, and I will go get a piece of plywood and cut it down and start mowing through them and making 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't think I'm going to quite make 20. I'll probably make 15 because I do have about 5 of the thicker boxes. So now I'm going to set up the table saw to make a test cut for the width of the shelf so that I can test fit it before I cut all the shelves to the same size. So I test fitted into one of the worst slots that I wound up cutting, it turns out, but it still goes in. This cabinet goes in a little, this cabinet goes out a little. Cheap plywood. Setting the Izzy Swan jigs back up to cut the 1/4 inch sheet into shelf size pieces. Well, it's getting late, so I'm gonna almost hit the camera. Whoops. Better go over and fix that. Yeah, at least I noticed that before I knocked it over. There's always later. I'll just set this piece of plywood back here for later. I'll be making more cuts, I'm sure. So I'm setting up a temporary stop to make these shelves the right depth, and I'll just start batching those things out. This is the one that bows in a touch, so it's going to take me a little, like, yep. These things in. Hey, there's that expensive woodpecker square sitting in a precarious location. It would be really dumb to cut another piece right now. That's all good. Alright. I need to cut another piece. One thing you'll notice as I make this cut is I'm using really good technique. I'm paying attention to how the edge of the plywood is up against the fence and keeping it tight and pushing it through. Really watching that tightness up against the fence. Okay, this is going to be bad. Just don't cuss on camera, Jay. Gosh golly gee willikers. Pretty sure that's what I said. If you actually want to see the carnage from me dropping that square, I'll be talking about it in the third part of this video series on building the hardware store. The good news is I maintained my composure enough to complete the cut, and you can see all the shelves in the cabinets in the background. I'm now setting up the table saw to make my French cleats to hang this thing, because that's all I have left to do. Normally I would show this part in fast motion, but I was kind of laughing at my own face while I was making this cut. When you're making a 45-degree cut, it's really important to push the piece up against the fence and against the table. And my face shows how little I like making these kind of 45-degree cuts. Here I am over in the shop annex. I'm getting ready to put up the French cleats to hang the cabinets. I'm finding the studs and measuring for the French cleat lengths. Once I get them cut, I can mount them on the wall and throw the cabinets up. One of these days I'll build another cabinet, but I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do. So for now, I'm just gonna load these things up. That concludes the second part of the hardware store build. I did the upper cabinets in this build. You can see there's more bins back here. I've bought more bins, I've filled more bins, I've done a ton of hardware organization since that video. In that video you could see this side piece was attached. I've since added these pull-out shelves, and the third part will deal with that, plus another piece I plan to add to this, I think. And also, the third part of this video is going to talk about the not so graceful exit of my square from the table saw that happened in this video. The conclusion of that is probably not what you think. I did spend some money, and it's kind of a humorous way that it all came together and ended. So stay tuned, subscribe so that you can see the conclusion of my square debacle. And thanks for watching. That was much better.